You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please kick us off.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm excited to have Neshmeen Faatimah. Nash is the founder and CEO of Nuzzle, a veterinary edtech company using AI-powered simulations to train vets and techs in hard-to-teach topics like client communication, anesthesia, and complex case management. She started Nuzzle while getting her MBA at Harvard Business School after losing her cat to a preventable communication breakdown. Previously, she worked in investing and operating across life sciences and education technology. Nash, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, sorry to hear about your cat. Why don't you give us that story and how it evolved into Nuzzle?
Yeah, I like to joke that, like any good founder, my origin story is one born out of trauma. But when my cat had got sick, it was my first exposure to a complex chronic care journey from a pet owner's perspective. So before that, I had a good understanding of the business side of things of the industry from my time in private equity. I was the go-to for all things animal related at our fund, but conceptualizing, revenue retention as just things on a spreadsheet can kind of distance you from the human experiences underneath, and being able to feel it viscerally, the stress, the confusion, the loss of trust visit after visit, the heartbreak, helplessness, you name it. I started talking to people all over the industry to kind of understand what's going on. And I saw that there was a huge gap in client communication where it was a thing that everyone understands is a problem, that it's important to delivering care, but it's undertaught, it's undertrained, and it's kind of there's a lack of a systematic understanding of something that is a systemic problem. And that's what we've been trying to do, is building that understanding and training communication alongside things like clinical reasoning at a scale and urgency that it's needed.
So cool. One of the first really unique ideas we've had on the show in a while. So, really, really interesting to see the pain of losing your animal turn into an opportunity for more training. Now, we've had other conversations with people that are trying to train veterinary professionals, but it feels very technology heavy. So tell us about the technology.
Yeah, so before I get into the product or the tech, I want to start with kind of just what we're trying to accomplish. And that kind of leads in. So, what we're doing really at the first stage of it is measuring and analyzing what DVMs are doing today, how they're approaching communication today, and figuring out like what are the most common success and failure patterns so that we can build training that's targeted, relevant, and evidence based. A lot of the time, what I see in this industry is training is synonymous to content. And it's more of like what I want to tell you than what is relevant for you and what's happening for you. So we're starting with like what is actually going on today with vets across different career stages. And then we build a simulation tool that both measures what they're doing. So I can go into that a little bit more. And then building training that gets at the very specific failure patterns, if that makes sense.
So, can you unpack it for us? Because we're starting to build this sort of the audio, what it is visually. Is it a software? What does it look like as a product? How do we interact with it? What does it look like in a day-to-day life?
Yeah, so it's very simple. It's a case simulation tool. We get hundreds of vets to tackle standardized cases interacting with AI simulated clients. So these clients and case facts, they're the same across vets. So what happens is we can see the strategies and patterns in what they say, when they say it, and the outcomes that they get to in terms of client trust, visit friction, in terms of plan completeness, acceptance. So if you imagine 200 early career vets, they're tackling a standardized case on derm, talking to an AI client, and we're seeing how they're framing diagnostic and treatment recommendations, how effectively or efficiently they're building trust, how are they talking about costs, how are they responding to resistance. And as this measurement is happening, the doctors themselves are getting practice talking to clients in different settings and training around having difficult conversations in a low stakes environment. Does that make sense?
It does. So, and I think it's not only the new grads, but I faced a very interesting issue recently. We're converting one of our urgent care hospitals into general practice, and I've been doing precisely 20 years medicine in urgent care and critical care. So when I get into the exam room for a vaccination, I'm speechless. I don't have anything to say. I'm like, so you're fine, and can I just poke you with the vaccines and leave? No value, no articulation of, like, what do I need to, I don't have a talk track. That's what I always talk about. Like, for any sick pet, I have a talk track. I don't have a talk track for GP. So I can see the application of it. What is your ideal customer profile? Where's your market with that, to sort of more go into a business model on this? Where do you see a market, and who is it applicable to out of our listeners that would be like, oh my God, that's me, I should go get this?
Yeah, so right now we're currently deployed at large practice groups that have thousands of early career vets, and it's kind of built into their in-house early career training and mentorship programs. We've also launched at a few schools, and where we're at, scale and volume are important so that we can get more of an idea of what's happening at a sample at a larger size and get insights about the population level before we go out to individual vets. Individual vets can participate in our study, which is just go online and do a quick simulation, and we're going to capture some details about how you're communicating. Ultimately, we want to get to is making this the most scalable and effective modality of training, measuring and training what are complex performance skills, like that require application, not just knowledge. So communication is like playing tennis. You can't learn tennis from watching lectures on tennis. And that's a lot of what CE today is here's how you communicate, but not actually what they do. So that's number one on that gap. And number two is just making this a way for teams to actually get on the same page a little more. So if you think of it as like operational change management, helping people see how they're doing things as a group, as a team. So there's a little less. Industry likes to disagree on a lot of things. So just getting them kind of to see things from the same perspective a little bit more.
Yes, very interesting. So we're talking about a web-based application, I'm guessing?
Correct.
Perfect. And, this feels like maybe required training. How do you make it not feel like that for somebody that's been told they have to do it?
Because it's fun, as someone that has a little bit of a background in applied behavioral science. If you don't have something that's fun and engaging, you're going to be climbing up a steep hill. And that's the number one thing we work towards from a user interface, user experience perspective, to where I'm really proud to say that early career vets actually ask me to give them more cases, even when it's part of their schoolwork. They're like, can we have more? Which I'm quite proud of because of the effort we put into like making something that they want and not something that we just want them to digest.
So, just to unpack again a little bit on the technology side of things. So, what is the data that's going in? Are we talking just sentiment analysis of the audio? Is it the visual clues? Is it like eyeball tracking? Like, to what depth do you go about the cues of the behavior that is interpreted and creates that feedback loop?
Right now, I'm really focused on structuring and framing and sequencing of communication. I can give you an example here. So we've seen already with our study that 2/3 of vets are solution first in their communication. What that means is they go in, they lead with their solutions very quickly before they try to align with the client on what their concerns are or what they even want to achieve. And imagine someone comes to you for advice and you immediately throw solutions at them. Even if your solution is the best solution in the world, they don't feel like you have an understanding of their needs enough to have earned the right to provide that solution. So there's a lot of research on premature problem solving in helping professions that actually prevent you from solving the problem quickly. So like how many vets are actually going in trying to understand the client, how many are just going in, here's your recommended diagnostics and treatments. And then we're also looking at perceptions of, so solution first vets also, they think they feel believed, they feel heard, they're making the client feel heard a lot more than alignment first vet. And then how they structure information often is a long monologue rather than structuring information for a brain that's under threat There's lots of techniques out there on how you get alignment with people when they're cognitively overloaded because they're considering all these life or death situations. So in negotiation research, there's a lot there on like how to quickly get on the same page with people. And a lot of that is about the sequencing of how you're dripping in information and how you're interact. Does that answer your question? So we're not really looking at eyeballs or whatever yet. It's more like tactically, how are you coming in with your information? How are you chunking it, structuring it to get to the best outcome?
How did you, I mean, we understand the origin story, but how did you come up with an idea to tackle this beyond just feeling the experience that you felt and knowing that it could have been better? And what's your background, a little bit deeper than the intro, that made you decide that this was the thing that you wanted to spend your time doing?
Yeah, two-part question. I'll first say how I got here. Part of it was on purpose, part of it was an accident. So when I was doing research on the space on, how I could have gotten to a different outcome, where the gaps are, training was a big thing. There's a chasm. It's unsurprising that people brought up training a lot as a gap. And we built these case simulations. We were like, hey, at Harvard, we didn't learn through lectures. We only learned through case-based learning, and we had a lot of simulations. I thought it seems like a similar thing. And when we started rolling these simulations, that's when we saw the data potential that you could quickly see what decisions people are making for different case topics, both in terms of like the diagnostics they're selecting, the treatments, but also how they're going at the case, how they're approaching different aspects of it. So that's how that came about. And then my background is in computer science and economics for my undergrad. And then I worked in private equity, kind of in investing operations. And then I was at Harvard. And there we focused a lot on motivation, incentives, behavioral science, alignment, leadership, communication. So it kind of all came together into this one very specific niche.
So the question about your kind of journey to get here. So being number of years in private equity and saying no to so many companies, which is, one of my experience was raising capital from private equity, and then flipping to the entrepreneurial side, knowing how many times you hear no from investors. How was that transition, or you knew that this is a clear path because I have that experience, this is going to get all the boxes checked in the investment round?
I guess there's two sides to this. One is I actually didn't want to be very investor first at the outset. I wanted to really focus on customers, and I've successfully managed to be a bootstrapped customer funded company, which I'm slightly proud of, not having gone into the venture capital route too early. But also from my time, we looked at in PE, we looked at a lot of life sciences, learning and compliance companies, and education technology. So I had a sense for kind of the realm of workforce development, what organizational software, training software can look like, and what people are on the lookout for. If that makes sense.
Sure does. And yeah, congrats. It's a different experience being a bootstrap founder versus a VC founder, having done both. And I don't know that there's one that's better. So it's just different. What's the big vision? So, 5 years, everything went right. And what's the company look like in 5 years? And that's probably also a really great question to pair with that one, which is why Nuzzle? What's the significance of the name of the company?
I'll start with why Nuzzle. It felt like my brand personally is someone that is very playful, but also really serious. And Nuzzle kind of played into that. It felt cute and approachable, but then, it got down to business. And what was that? What was the other question? The vision. Yeah. So my ultimate goal is, help us all get along a little better. We're in tough times. These macroeconomic conditions vets are graduating into, it's really, really tough. You're having these early career vets that are learning medicine also figure out how to talk about costs that are in the thousands to then ten thousands of dollars. My cat is about to go through radiation therapy, and I got the estimate, and I was like, wow, this is not a small number. And really, in these times, I feel like to reduce burnout and to improve trust, you just need people to get along better and understand each other better. And I see this as a way to train the skills that ultimately get us all to connect as humans and get to our end goals better. So in the next 5 years, I would hope we get to all the schools, we get to the early career training programs, and really start there before we branch out to other technician programs and CSRs and other segments.
Fascinating story and very interesting background as an entrepreneur. Where do people find you, and where do they find the technology, and how can they interact with it and just give it a go and see how that works?
Yeah, if you're a vet, I'd love you to participate in the study, encourage your peers, and you can do that by going into link.nuzzle.tech/study. Right now, since we're in the kind of the enterprise product development stage, it's not publicly available for folks, unfortunately, to train. Maybe that will change in the recent future, but if you're a technician, that actually is available online just for anesthesia monitoring and management. And you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, we'll connect the link to the show notes. There are two questions that we always ask at the end of the episode. The first one: is there a book, TED Talk, any sort of material, a YouTube video that you recently consumed, with whichever way we consume information these days, that inspired you and you would like to share here?
Yes, there's a book. It's actually a foundational text. It's called Getting to Yes, and it's foundational on how alignment actually happens between two people. And I think it kind of shifts the perspective of how vet client conversations happen and how breakdowns happen, because usually these breakdowns aren't about disagreement on what's best for the pet. They're about these unspoken interests and assumptions and constraints for these humans on both sides. And I've had vets read this book before, and they agreed that it helped change how they think about these conversations and made them a little more collaborative and not kind of transactional. So I'd love people to read that book.
Never thought about that book as a veterinarian trained. I love the book, and there was always like more about negotiations, but it's interesting to apply it from that angle. So I would love to review it in that angle.
Yeah, I worry about using the word negotiation too much in in what I'm doing, because I feel like it can scare people. But there is a lot of negotiation, right? That is what medicine is. So
Oh, and God forbid, never say sales, because vets are not selling anything except diagnostics, medications, and everything else.
Wellness exams. The list goes on and on. Neshmeen, one last question for you. Another innovator that you think would be a good guest for the podcast?
yes, I would love Dr. Lindsay Hedges from Mission Pet Health to be on here. The reason is that she is someone who's been taking a data and behavioral science driven approach to this whole field of early career doctor mentorship. And she's created this incredible organizational level mentorship program that doesn't just, it's not just words on a page. They're living it, they're doing it. So I'd love her to share what she's doing there.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinarynnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.